future Hall of Famers Peyton Manning and Tom Brady losing successive weeks in the playoffs. Does this tarnish their legacy for being an all-time great quarterback? And what about that matchup of two Harbaugh brothers? It is Nick Rice, Phil Nunziata, and a special guest live on the NFL Gold Line with Nick and Phil. Hello, everybody, and welcome inside the NFL Gold Line studios. I'm your host, Nick Rice, alongside Phil Nunziata, and we have a very entertaining show on tap for you today. We are set for the Super Bowl and a lot of other headlines throughout the entire week. I want to thank you guys for joining us here live on the NFL Goal Line, and we will get right into our starting topic. Obviously, what really has hit the scene in Philadelphia, a lot of debate on this topic because, you don't know a college coach going into the NFL, what kind of an impact that kind of a situation will have on your team. We have a special guest coming on our show in just a matter of moments, but we'll get a quick word from Phil Nunziata. Your thoughts on a hiring of Chip Kelly, former Oregon Ducks head coach, that really was extremely successful in those ranks before going up to the pros.
Well, when I first heard about this, I had a lot of emotions go through my mind. But the first one was just shock, because anyone that followed this whole story, I had assumed that Chip Kelly was out of the race. You know, we had talked to him. I think he came back for another interview, but he pretty much said that he was going to stay at Oregon, and we continued elsewhere. And it looked like Gus Bradley was actually going to be our guy. And, the other day I go to leave for work, and right before I turn the TV off, I see it on the bottom of the screen, Chip Kelly to the Eagles, and I was shocked that he changed his mind the way he did. And it really, at this point, there's more questions than answers because our coaching staff is nowhere near filled out. There's a lot of questions here. I don't hate the move. I don't love the move necessarily. I didn't run out and buy ring polish, immediately after hearing this. There's definitely a lot of questions, but I think the overall opinion in Philadelphia is positive because at this point, change is good. But it's definitely an interesting thing. There's a lot more questions than answers at this point, Nick.
And obviously, I'm extremely skeptical on one big issue. And there was a lot of teams that really needed to fill in that spot of their team. San Diego Chargers, yours truly, a big fan of the Chargers. Also, a team that really needed a new head coach, a new regime at that top position, and a lot of other teams need that sort of renewal in their front office. And obviously, Chip Kelly is one of the better coaches on the market going into this coming year. Philadelphia snags him, but perhaps, I believe, too big of a deal. They gave him a 5-year contract worth $32.5 million, which, if you rank that among all the coaches in the league based on contracts, he's paid one of the top 7 coaches in the league, and he has not coached a down in the NFL to this point. And we're talking about some terrific coaches that, the Tom Coughlins and Mike McCarthy's of the world. He's paid more than them. So a head-scratching decision, and also news coming out today, apparently the Browns CEO on Chip Kelly, they said that he was just too big of a gamble. And that was the case for a lot of teams. It just seemed to be too big of a risk for NFL teams to fire on a coach that hasn't played it down in the NFL. Now, I'm also curious to why they give him such a big contract. Just a week ago, he said he was committed to being an Oregon Duck for yet another year. He bailed on the NFL last year, going back to the college ranks, and this year looked to be the same kind of deal. But I believe maybe Chip Kelly was lured into that Philadelphia job with a contract that I believe now he still has to fill in big shoes. The former coach for the Eagles, Andy Reid, Chip Kelly has big shoes to fill, but with that size of a contract, I believe Chip Kelly had a situation where that's kind of hard to not go to the NFL with that big of a deal on the taking.
Yeah, with $32 million, Chip Kelly can definitely buy himself a lot of visors, and it's definitely a big contract. He's got a lot to own up to, and at the same time, you look at this guy's resume. If you are going to pull, a coach out of the college ranks, it's going to be a guy like this. This guy went 46-7 in his 4 years at Oregon. Went to a BCS bowl game in every year he was the head coach there. And here's the thing that is really going to be interesting: the offense that he ran in Oregon, they ran a play every 26.7 seconds, which is 4 seconds faster than the fastest offense in the NFL, which was the New England Patriots. Me and Nick have now both given our opinion on this. We're going to bring in a special guest now. This is Hank Cinnamon. You might know him from YouTube if you follow those types of series with his YouTube account, Power Rangers. Hank, can you hear us, man?
Yes, I can.
So what was your first thought? We're talking about Chip Kelly now here in the Eagles. What was your initial reaction when you got the news that he was our new head coach?
Well, my mouth dropped wide open and my tongue just streamed out, and I was in a state of shock. It was probably the weirdest state of shock ever.
It's just one of those things you thought it was over and done with. It's like that character in the movie that you thought died 3 times and he comes back not exactly to save the day. It's definitely interesting. This guy seemed like he was completely out of the race, and then he jumps back in here, and I'm kind of indifferent on it. I know you don't exactly hate it completely, but you're definitely more towards the not happy about this. Am I correct?
Yeah, mostly just because he seemed like a very, very overrated coach coming out this offseason. And, I mean, I don't think this team needs to be in the spotlight any more than they have been in the past, because they haven't been performing on the football field. But it just seems like every single one of these high profile hirings that this team makes, the Nunziata was, the Jason Babbins, all those guys just seem to be, even the Michael Vick re-signing of his $100 million contract over 6 or 7 years has just absolutely been a negativity for this team. Not only that, because I feel like this team is talented. What worries me is Chip's commitment, because obviously he showed that he wasn't committed to Oregon by leaving, despite their possible sanctions. But if this team doesn't perform, I don't know how 100% committed he's going to be, especially with the Nick Sabans and the Bobby Petrinos out there.
See, I do think it's a little bit different with Chip Kelly because, we've had college coaches just up and leave regardless. I mean, example, one of the guys that we had talked to in this offseason was Brian Kelly, the Notre Dame coach, and I don't think I could have been more upset had we went with that hire, because the way he left Cincinnati for Notre Dame, to me, is just sickening. I don't think I will ever have a positive opinion on that man after that. I think if you were going to leave for the pro ranks, he did it the best way he could. It's still going to be awkward. There's still going to be people that are hurt in the matter. But it was interesting earlier you did bring up Michael Vick, and that's one of the bigger questions now. Do we keep him around? He's owed a lot of money less than a week after the Super Bowl. People, one side of the argument is if you're going to have a spread offense, Michael Vick will be your guy. Do you have faith that Nick Foles could run an offense that's created by Chip Kelly?
Chip Kelly ran an I formation at the University of New Hampshire when he coached there. And of course he ran the spread, the option in Oregon. So I'm hoping that he's going to be able to, formulate his own, kind of offense in Philadelphia. Of course, rehiring of Pat Shurmur to the Philadelphia Eagles organization after Shurmur was with the team from 2002 to 2008 as a quarterbacks coach. I'm hoping that the Eagles are going to be able to become more of a pro-style offense, and Chip Kelly is mostly just going to be a game manager and not really the guy who's going to be calling the plays every time. But if he is a real coach, a real football guy, as he says he is, much like the Jim Harbaughs of course, Jim Harbaugh, who has Colin Kaepernick, a sprint option quarterback, when he coached the likes of Alex Smith before, who is a pro-style quarterback, Andrew Luck, who's a pro-style quarterback, and when he was, I believe he was the quarterback's coach for the Oakland Raiders. I could be wrong, but, a good coach has to be able to deal with what they have And, of course, Colin Kaepernick is the best quarterback that San Francisco has, and they built an offense off of him. Why not try to build an offense off of Nick Foles? Personally, I have no personal problem with Michael Vick. I just feel that despite the lack of speed, despite the lack of a release, and despite the lack of deep passing ability, Nick Foles has more upside than Michael Vick does.
Yeah, I think I could agree with that. We have a lot of holes still to fill as far as coaching staff concerned. We don't know precisely what Pat Shurmur's position will be with the Eagles, but I think you're right. If you're going to try and pull this thing off, you definitely brought in a guy that would put you in the positive direction. A lot of people aren't too high on him because of his days in Cleveland, but, and I'm sorry for any Browns fans out there, it's really hard to judge somebody on their success or downstrots in Cleveland because of the way that organization is put together. I definitely think Pat Shurmur will have a chance to make things a little bit better, but there's still plenty of holes to be put in on this. And Hank, hopefully, if we get some of these figured out, we can have you back on the show again sometime soon.
Oh, exactly. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, Sam.
All right, bye.
Bye.
And that was Hank Cinnamon. Obviously, he's a guy hopefully we can have on more shows. He's a terrific insight and obviously a huge Philadelphia fan. Glad to have him a part of our show. Chip Kelly, we were talking about him being a new member of the Philadelphia Eagles squad as a head coach over in Philadelphia. And now, hopefully, that team can really turn it around. It was the first time in over a decade that team couldn't put together a winning year. And Philadelphia, obviously, I think getting things going with Chip Kelly, but there are so many questions, Phil, that I believe that it'll take a number of years for Philadelphia to fully make the turnaround. They have to owe a lot of money to guys that really aren't producing the way that the Eagles expected that they did, most notably Michael Vick having the huge, monster-sized contract. I don't know if for quarterback, I don't believe Michael Vick's the answer, but I don't believe this draft is the answer either. A lot of people say that a number of these quarterbacks that should be taken in the first round don't have the sort of potential and the consistency that you would expect to run a franchise around. I don't know if the draft is the answer or free agency, but Philadelphia certainly has a lot of issues at its hand, and it starts at quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been – there's so many rumors going around from, Tim Tebow coming to the Eagles, which, I really don't think that's going to happen. And I've heard things as crazy as trading maybe a second or third round pick to the Baltimore Ravens for their backup quarterback, Tyrod Taylor, because he ran some type of similar offense in his days in Virginia Tech. There's just so many options out there right now that you don't know which ones are true, which ones are false. Really, I think the big concern for Chip Kelly, I watched an interview with him on Eagles Live earlier in the week, and they're asking him questions about Michael Vick, and, he said all I can do now is meet with Michael and kind of have my own opinion on him after seeing him maybe play for a little bit. But the clock is ticking because I think it's 6 days after the Super Bowl. You either pay this guy a lot of money or you let him go. So it's definitely so many questions to be asked. At least the head guy is there. But now I think his main concern for this offseason right now is really getting a staff that he can have success with years to come.
And obviously, it's very risky we're going back to the head coaching position here, and this isn't Philadelphia goal line. This is NFL goal line. We like to bring it all full circle around the National Football League. Obviously, it's very risky to bring an NFL head coach from the college ranks to run your organization around. There's a number of coaches that, including the Harbaughs, that didn't really have success the first time out, but have had more success as of late. Pete Carroll, another prime example. Coming into the NFL ranks for a while, not really having the kind of success that they expected, and then going back to the college ranks for a little while. Here's Doug Marrone, now being a part of this Buffalo team that really has a lot of holes, similar to Philadelphia, and will probably take more than just 1 year to make a full turnaround. What are your thoughts on bringing a Syracuse head coach, Doug Marrone, to lead your football team, where in college he was just above 500 in the NCAA ranks? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on this a little bit last week. I didn't really understand this hire. I mean, he had a decent year this year at Syracuse. If you're Buffalo, you want a coach that makes free agents want to go there, make players want to get drafted there, make the good players you have already to stay there. And honestly, this was not as big of a splash as it maybe should have been. They maybe should have, Ken Wisenhunt, a name like that, there's just bigger names out there. Andy Reid, maybe they should have gotten the Andy Reid sweepstakes a little bit more, but they seem really content. I mean, the only thing I could say, maybe, he is from Syracuse, is a New Yorker, northern figure already. Maybe they were hoping that popularity would help. But overall, this was a head-scratching pick for me with Buffalo.
And obviously, Buffalo, it's just the reason why the Bills are the Bills are decisions like these. You just can't be a fan of a decision that really might set your team back a few more years. They have to pay Mark Fitzpatrick some big-time money as well. So having a coach like this where he really didn't bring together his team like you would expect, it's just so head-scratching, this sort of a decision. I was a lot more in favor of bringing in Chip Kelly for the Eagles rather than this decision. They didn't make the blockbuster move, but they gave Doug Marrone the blockbuster money, which is really scratching my head in this instance. Another decision, not in the head coaching ranks here, but heading into just a few days ago, following the Ravens' win over the Patriots. We'll go more into these conference championship games in just a minute. But I don't know if you heard, but Wes Welker, after the game, his wife making headlines about the fact that Ray Lewis should not be looked as a sort of superstar figure after some really nasty comments after the game. Is there any sort of explanation for extracurricular activities such as this? I mean, in a way, there's no room for the NFL to have this sort of outbreak, especially this late in the year with such a dynamic player who's given so much to the league.
Yeah, this to me was very, middle school girl on Facebook, Twitter kind of deal. And I understand, I'm not going to defend her at any way. It was very inappropriate to bring that stuff up. But the way that it makes sense, Wes Walker had a few big drops in this game. Now his future with the Patriots has come into question. It's not exactly an easy ride right now in the Welker household. So I think that was just that kind of frustration coming out there. She has apologized since, which is good. I think that's going to take some of the heat off her. But overall, I agree with you. There's no place for that in the NFL, especially after games are over. There's just no need.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just there's no place in the NFL for that kind of activity, and obviously, it just takes away from the game. Similar situation to Monte Teo. Now that's a different story for a different day. Obviously,
do a whole show on that.
Yeah, I don't believe that'll hurt Teo's draft stock, but it will cause him to question his legacy might be on the line for that kind of activity, similar to Wes Welker. That kind of activity, it may not have been him, but just that kind of activity really just tarnishes such a great game. And obviously, he'll be put into question. Monte Teo into question, of course. And it's just there's no place in the game for that kind of activity. We're taking a quick 30-second break here. NFL Goal Line. We'll be right back bringing you the conference championship game recaps and what to make of a Harbaugh versus Harbaugh rematch. The NFL Goal Line continues. We'll take a 30-second timeout. Welcome back to the NFL Goal Line with Nick Rice and Phil Nunziata. I don't know if you've noticed my voice a little bit lower here, under the weather as of the recent days, but we are still alive and well on the NFL Goal Line on a Tuesday night edition of NFL Goal Line. And this is just 2 days following the fallout between four of the top teams in the NFL. Obviously, the big game was the early matchup between the San Francisco 49ers and the Atlanta Falcons. And after a number of years where Matt Ryan is short of the playoffs, his legacy might be tarnished. I mean, obviously it's very early in his career, but there's a difference between players that figure out a way in the playoffs to figure out the plays that win games. And nothing was more evident than the 17-point comeback 17-point lead by the Falcons that was tarnished by that terrific comeback by the Niners, giving all the credit to San Francisco. A coaching style that was pound the rock early and often. But Matt Ryan, sure, his statistics look pretty impressive. Nearly 400 yards through the air, only 1 interception and 3 touchdowns. But what to make of a Falcon performance that in the second half was extremely abysmal and led to that Falcon loss?
Well, I mean, when you combine their performance in the NFC Championship game and even their game against the Seahawks, which was eventually a win, these Dirty Birds are making, blown leads look like their national pastime. No matter how many points they're ahead by, they're up by 20, they're up by 17. It doesn't matter because they find a way to cough up the lead, and you can't win championships that way. I made predictions early in the year that this team was going to make a deep playoff run. I was correct on that. They made it a couple of minutes away from a Super Bowl appearance. But, you just cannot do that regardless of how many points you have, no matter how big your lead is. This is the NFL. That's why you play the game. They can evaporate pretty quickly, and the Falcons know that. They know how to get leads. They have the offensive firepower to do so. But now that defense really needs to step up and keep the clamp down even when the offense isn't necessarily performing as good as they were early in the game.
And this is an interesting problem for Atlanta. Over the past few years, they've drafted extremely well. They've hired guys. They've completely rehauled their team and their coordinating position, and have still had constant success. This is a team that is extremely talented, but figures out a way to make games close that they really should blow out. And then obviously in this scenario, they cough up leads that they really should hold on for the win. The only finger that I point is to that rushing game that couldn't close it out in the final minutes. Jacquizz Rodgers and Michael Turner combined 18 rushes for 62 yards. That's under 70 yards on the ground when you had a 17-point lead. I mean, it's a head-scratching call, but obviously the Niners are powerful up front, and Atlanta will continue that legacy of being so short in the playoffs. For Atlanta, what kind of off-season acquisition should they make to increase this team's potential? Obviously, they are extremely talented, especially in the passing game, but what sort of weaknesses create a cause for concern for this team next year when they could potentially have another win-or-go-home scenario in the playoffs?
Well, one thing that they're going to have to deal with that they maybe didn't see coming is that one of those offensive playmakers could very well be gone. Tony Gonzalez has already said he's about 95% sure that he will not return next year, and he will retire having a great career, probably one of the best tight ends in the game, if not the best. First ballot Hall of Famer in my book. But that's going to be big shoes to fill. They have some tight ends that have stepped up, here and there. But Gonzalez plays most of those snaps at the tight end position. I think they're only going to get a little worse from here. They have a lot more to deal with than they realize. Obviously, it's easy to say that you need to bump up on defense, but we've seen this defense play great. I don't know that they need to bring in any one player. They just need to be more consistent with what they have. My favorite quote when it comes to coaching or building up a team said from Dick Vermeil the day he signed with the Eagles, saying, we're not going to go out and get a bunch of players, different players right away. We're going to make the people we have better. And I think that's really the mentality they have to have. They have the pieces and they have the talent. Now they just have to make it work.
And obviously a 13-3 season, more victories than that Niners squad. It just is. There's a number of very small problems that the Falcons had that was really overshadowed by a terrific record that really was unblemished for a majority of the season. The only issue I have is just on a few fronts. For the Falcons, their running game is not the kind that I would expect in that veteran offensive line. I would expect more for a running game, despite a rushing attack that includes two guys that were washed away in the NFL just earlier in their career. And then the receiving game, to have a guy not named Gonzalez, White, or Jones not make a catch till nearly the fourth quarter, Harry Douglas making his first catch way later in the game. There's a value of having a number of receiving threats that really has gone unnoticed. Now, of course, the teams that are remaining in the league, they have a receiving core that's a lot more balanced. Most notably, San Francisco spreading the ball around. There's Vernon Davis, Michael Crabtree, even Randy Moss getting in the action, maybe Delaney Walker. So the issue with the Falcons is having that dynamic receiving threat that will be Gonzalez-less, most likely, going into next year. As for San Francisco, I mean, this team is already set to be a terrific contender for a number of years. A lot of one of the most youngest rosters in the NFL. And you go from offense to defense, even special teams. This team is absolutely ready for another deep run in the next few years. I mean, this team is already set. What has impressed you most about the San Francisco team?
Really, it's just, as I mentioned, making the people they have better. Here's a team that under Mike Singletary, was very underachieving. And they bring in Jim Harbaugh. They didn't really get that many extra players. This year they did sign a few, receiver help, Randy Moss, people of that nature, and of course the drafting of Colin Kaepernick. But the core of that team has been the same, both when they were playing very poorly and now that they're in the Super Bowl. So the core of that team has really just improved. They have probably the best linebacker tandem in the NFL right now. The Ravens might not like to hear that, but honestly, that's my opinion with that. That it's just an offensive. Offense, defense doesn't matter. They make plays when they need to. The interesting thing about it, we very rarely see a team hit the Super Bowl when someone is still guessing on how to defend them. Usually, when someone brings in a new player that's a spark plug, that is fizzled out by the playoffs, and they're like every other team just trying to make it. I feel this Niners offense is actually still relatively unknown. The Ravens are going to have to defend it. It's still new. It's about 9 weeks old at this point. There's still plenty of questions about it, which personally, I know we're not going to get too much into the Super Bowl now. That's going to be our show next week. But I don't think they've quite seen anything like this, which will give the Niners a little bit of an edge.
And obviously, the only situation for the Niners that really causes for concern and perhaps the most controversial and most wide-known kicker debate is that of the San Francisco 49ers. They bring in a guy, Billy Cundiff. I wasn't a big fan of the acquisition before. Still not a fan of the acquisition now. The coach for the Niners, Jim Harbaugh, backing on his kicker, saying that David Akers is our guy. Just a few weeks after signing another kicker, I'm confused about this situation, and I don't think you have any more resolve on this, Phil. But who do they go with in this situation? And in a sense, is this just a waste of time and a waste of notoriety?
Well, they did actually end up cutting Cundiff after the game. They pretty much brought him in to kind of wake Akers up, which, I'm a David Akers fan. He was an Eagles kicker for about 13 years. Loved the guy to death. He did miss a relatively easy kick in the NFC Championship game. And if that would have came back to hurt them, who knows if he has a job next year. But I definitely agree at this point. You can't bring in another kicker to be like, I know you haven't played with us all year, but we're in the Super Bowl. We need you to kick 47-yarders when you're sitting off the couch. That's just not a smart move. The best thing he could do is say that he has faith in David Akers, and that's what he's going to do. And hopefully, for me anyway, I'm hoping, because as I said, I'm a David Akers fan. If called upon in the Super Bowl, he can deliver.
Obviously, you just have to be a fan of a guy that set a franchise record for most field goal makes last season. It's head-scratching to why he is so inconsistent this year. And I don't think it'll come down to that kind of a situation with a Akers miss that cost them. But, I mean, you never know. And obviously, this matchup between Harbaugh brothers really is almost a side note in a sense. Obviously, it's hard to choose between which Harbaugh. We'll get into that next week. But for the Baltimore side, Ray Lewis ends his legacy of February 3rd, whether it's with a win or it's with a loss. Obviously, a subpar performance, only 6 total tackles compared to his standards so far in this playoffs. I've been very impressed with his run and how many tackles and huge plays he's made for this team so far this year. Now they are 1 win away from a Super Bowl championship. Do you just believe that this is a talented team that has more to do with the offensive success than Ray Lewis's contribution? Or is this just one of those years where, similar to the New Orleans run in 2009, where just every little thing that could go their way does, and now they're in the Super Bowl?
Well, both of these teams seem to almost be the team of destiny, it seems. The Ravens, for a while, have been, the team, they hang their hat on their defense, and their offense shows up sometimes. I think Joe Flacco is definitely coming into his own. He's playing out of his mind in these playoffs. It's just the time. I think everybody assumed if the Ravens were going to win a Super Bowl, that offense had to step up to the level, get on the level of the defense. And they're definitely, getting there, if not surpass them. It's been a while since, even when the Ravens won the Super Bowl in the past, it was never because they had a dynamic offense. Their offense did what they needed to do, and the defense took it from there. This is one of the few times that the Ravens' offense is on the same level as the defense.
And obviously, Baltimore facing the injury concerns. They're finally getting a little bit healthier, but still don't have Ladarius Webb. He's still out for the year with his injury he suffered earlier on in the season. But as an offense, I believe that this team just seems to have that complementary guy. That's Anquan Bolden. He had 2 touchdowns in today's game and really helped this offense force the issue for the New England Patriots that they have to match up point for point against this Raven team. And Joe Flacco was up to the task and Tom Brady was not. And this is on the wake of a week ago, Peyton Manning being jousted by this Ravens team. What legacy does Tom Brady have? Now, obviously, he's still one of the greats of all time. You could argue the greatest quarterback to ever be under center. But for Tom Brady, only 8-7 since the Super Bowl runs he's had that ended in 2004. He's also been short of the Super Bowl for 9 consecutive years. Obviously, he's a great regular season quarterback, but what's the legacy for this all-time great?
Well, honestly, I'm not a huge Tom Brady fan. I respect what he's done, in his career. But the way I look at it, he was seen as a superhuman, can do no wrong, human being, not even quarterback, after those 3 Super Bowls. And at this point, with all these losses and these shortcomings, he's back down to just a very, very good, if not great, quarterback. He's no longer this superhuman, can do no wrong guy, which I think is fine. I think it's humbling. I think if he wins another ring, he will appreciate it more, actually having to work for these. The other 3 came so quickly that who knows how much time he took to really soak them in and appreciate it. I think after, as you said, a 9-year struggle trying to get back to it, if Brady does in fact get another ring before he calls it quits, I think he'll appreciate it a lot more.
And obviously, one more Super Bowl ring would put Brady at ring number 4, and I think would put him back to among the top 2 or 3. You still have to think that there are a number of quarterbacks that have had more playoff success. That really is the key to winning in the NFL. Joe Flacco, early on in his career. Now, heading into this year, ironically enough, he calls himself the greatest quarterback now. And certainly he's one win away from being that greatest quarterback now based on winning the Lombardi Trophy. 28-13 outcome, a larger deficit or a much larger defeat than the San Francisco 49ers. We're not going to go deep into the Super Bowl preview. That's for next week. But for this Baltimore squad, what's going to be the most dangerous weapon heading into next week that the San Francisco 49ers will have to really bite on their fingers that they have to defend for next week, really have to cause for concern for next weekend?
Yeah, again, we're trying not to get too much into next weekend because we're going to have a whole show about that. But this is just, this was the Super Bowl I wanted to happen. Brother versus brother. You couldn't write it any better. And like I said earlier, both these teams just seem like they're destined for it. And the thing of it is, only one of them can win. So, I give a slight edge to the Niners, but, I can't really. And I'll go ahead and get this out of the way now. I am rooting for the Niners. Anyone that was curious, I am. I'd say, just 2% more leaning towards the Niners to win this game. If the Ravens win, I will not be upset. I think it'll be also a storybook ending there for Ray Lewis to ride off into the sunset. But I think either way, he's made that city proud. Going out in the Super Bowl, win or lose, is the way Ray Lewis deserves to leave. So, there's just so many things that we're trying not to get into now. But overall, as a fan, I'm excited because this is, to me, one of the best Super Bowls in quite some time.
Yeah, for the Baltimore side, they're playing for Ray Lewis, of course, but they're also playing for Torrey Smith with his dead brother early on in the year. Had a terrific performance against this New England Patriots team. Didn't have this similar performance in the playoffs, but did get it done. Playing for him as well, playing for the legacy of Joe Flacco. Will he be able to provide in the Super Bowl for the San Francisco side? Can they win Super Bowl number 6 for this franchise? And can Colin Kaepernick be a Super Bowl legacy early on in his career? We'll take a quick 30-second timeout here on the NFL Goal Line. We'll be right back with some more action around the National Football League. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the NFL Goal Line here. We're live with Nick Rice and Phil Nunziata. The Jaguars making some headlines, and obviously not in the win or loss column because obviously they really surprised me with how often they can't pull it out, and they have been a abysmal team for quite some time. Gus Bradley making headlines. Phil, what do you have?
Well, Gus Bradley looked like the front runner for the Eagles' job, but after Chip Kelly jumped in the mix, kind of stole it from him, he went to what he considered was his next best offer and is now the new head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Gus Bradley was the defensive coordinator of Seattle for the past 3 years, as most people know, in their playoff run, the dominating defense that they've had. I think it's a good pickup by the Jaguars. Obviously, their defense has never been terrible. I think, honestly, they could have benefited more from an offensive coach. But Gus Bradley, a lot of guys sought after him. From what I understand, it was a done deal. He was heading to Philadelphia before Chip Kelly jumped back in that race. So, I think he's a good guy. The Jaguars can only benefit from him. Here's a guy, he's done a lot of positive things in the past as a coordinator with teams like Seattle, that there was building process to be done. He wasn't just dropped into the right situation. So I think it's a good pickup by Jaguars. Obviously, they got a lot more to improve on, but I think it's definitely a big step in the right direction.
Obviously, Jacksonville does have a lot of holes that they do need to improve on coming in the next few years. And that first question for the Jacksonville Jaguars is their quarterback position. What to make with Blaine Gabbert? They drafted him just last year, and he was supposed to be the man of the future. Hasn't really turned out to be so far. And in my mind, it doesn't take a quarterback 4 or 5 years to see the body of work and what kind of future this quarterback will have. We know Russell Wilson, we know Andrew Luck and Robert Griffin will have solid careers. The only question is for Griffin, will the injuries really stunt his growth in the next few years? Similar to Michael Vick, he gets injured a lot, very injury prone, can't stay on the field. Outside of that, those 3 quarterbacks, we can already see the body of work. He will be a tremendous quarterback for a number of years. As for these coming quarterbacks in the draft, to replace a guy like Blaine Gabbert, I don't know if the draft is really the answer, especially this year. The quarterback class is considered a weaker position in this year's draft. Geno Smith is apparently supposed to be the top-rated selection in this year's draft. Where do the Jacksonville Jaguars go? They have the number 2 overall pick. Too high for a guy like Smith, but do they fall back and take that quarterback or wait till the second round?
Yeah, I mean, this could be one of the years, I don't know the exact stat, but it'd be, a good amount of time, probably 5 years or so, that a quarterback, it's very possible, does not go in the first round. You could get a second-round guy that ends up working out. I mean, the Eagles looks like they're going to jump on that train with Nick Foles. He was not a first-round draft pick. There's plenty of guys, we're under this common misconception these days that your quarterback has to be a top 10 pick to end up working out. I mean, we just got done talking about Tom Brady. He was in the 6th round. It's a matter of finding the right guy. I think Blaine Gabbert should have been a first-round pick anyway. I never thought he was a first-round talent, but he was given first-round money and first-round expectations. So really, it's an interesting thing to go by. I think somewhere a quarterback will be picked in the first round because teams are so desperate to find that franchise quarterback that they think they see one when they're not even there. It's like a mirage in some cases. But I think Jaguars could dip into the draft a little bit. The free agent market for quarterbacks is pretty thin at the moment. I can't imagine unless someone magically gets released in the offseason. I definitely think the Jaguars have a lot to worry about. As far as offensive weapon goes, Maurice Jones-Drew is almost not there mentally. And as far as receivers go, they have Cecil Shorts, but they have a lot. They traded Mike Thomas away, who's been a fan favorite and a relatively decent slot receiver for them for many years. This team, as far as offense, is in shambles. They do have a Pro Bowl caliber tight end in Mercedes Lewis, so at least you have a tight end to go off of. They do have one of the best fullbacks in the game in Greg Jones, but overall there's just holes everywhere. Their offensive line is decent, but you need a quarterback there. They have so many options, but I think it's because there's not much farther they can fall.
And obviously, there's a number of holes for that Jacksonville team. You didn't mention Justin Blackman. He's an up-and-coming guy that can make the big jump from year 1 to year 2. Obviously, that's a stretch. This is a guy that, for almost half the year, didn't have a single receiving touchdown. Had that breakout game against Houston, however. Obviously, a lot of big-time holes that the Jacksonville Jaguars will have to cover in this coming draft. A similar story for a number of teams. We'll go more into the draft situation later on. The NFL goal line will probably be about a one-time-a-month ordeal here as we just try to bring you all the upcoming analysis of the NFL. But we're wrapping up with the NFL season, with the Super Bowl being the final game here. And obviously the Pro Bowl coming up this weekend. We'll give our game balls and wrap up here on the NFL goal line. A very quick show. We'll go a lot more in depth next week as we try to prepare you guys with perhaps over-analysis of the Super Bowl. We tried to cut it short for the Super Bowl. We'll give you all the updated analysis for next week, as we'll also have also coach interviews, player interviews. Interesting to see the father of the Harbaughs, see his reaction on who to choose in this coming Super Bowl. All that and more will come up next week on the NFL goal line. But if we had one final word on this Super Bowl matchup, what would it be? Because it's the Ravens and the Niners. Obviously, it'd be disappointing for either one of the Harbaughs, either one of the teams, if they do not come out victors in this game. Very early in the Super Bowl preview, but what do you think? What are your reactions on this matchup?
Well, I agree. It's going to be tough to see either of these guys lose because I just picture both these teams. I'd be very shocked if either of these teams come out flat. I think we're looking – it's really easy to hype up any Super Bowl just because it is a Super Bowl. But we're looking at a classic in the making here. A lot of these playoff games this year have just been fantastic. You don't always get that. You tend to get a lot of lackluster playoff games. I think, most of the teams that made the playoffs this year actually deserved it. They didn't luck into it or anything of that nature. It was just a string of good games. I think this has been one of the more exciting playoff runs in at least 2 or 3 years, I would say. But honestly, I think this is an instant classic in the making. Again, I don't see either team coming out flat. I see both teams being heavily prepared for each other, and the brother aspect just adds to it. I'm sure it'll be a interesting thing in the Harbaugh household. That's a tongue twister when that day comes around. But overall, it's just one of those moments you get your friends together, you sit back, and you enjoy a great game.
Coming into this game, there's a headline coming out that for the next 2 weeks, both Harbaughs, only texting will be their line of communication. They will not call each other. They will not see each other. They both try to prepare, sibling on sibling, for each other. And I think the best way to prepare for each other will be to communicate. But obviously, it's competition, and we are just 11 days away from that ever-important game. Ravens and the Niners, winner, claiming the Super Bowl 47 Lombardi Trophy. Sit back and enjoy. It'll be a fantastic ride. We'll be right back with the NFL goal line next, I believe Tuesday. It should be Tuesday for all the previews going into that Super Bowl game. We'll give our game balls for the NFC and AFC championship games. I don't know if this is putting you on the spot, Phil. I don't have mine ready, but what's your game ball for these conference championship games?
This isn't necessarily the greatest performance, but if this is the last time we get to talk about this individual, I think it's worth saying. 8 catches, 78 yards, and a touchdown, and those are the stats that belong to Tony Gonzalez. And what a lot of people believe is his last game. I still think he's at least at worst, no matter if you don't like this guy, at worst, top 3 tight end in the history of football. If this is his last game, he was a pleasure to watch in Kansas City and Atlanta. Just a great guy. I don't think there's ever been any legal troubles with a guy like him. It'd be tough to see him go. I know the Falcons would miss him dearly. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give it to Tony Gonzalez because if it is the last hurrah to Tony, thanks for the memories.
And it's such a disappointment for Tony Gonzalez to not get that ever-elusive Lombardi Trophy, not even make it to the big game. And this was his first playoff win last week in his entire career, which really shows the kind of patience and poise that this tight end had for 15 years, predominantly with the Kansas City Chiefs. Very impressive. And obviously, you got to be a fan favorite of a guy that really was team first, himself second, and one of the greatest tight ends to ever play. I believe first ballot Hall of Famer is in the making for this tight end. My game ball goes to a guy that really provided the kind of second-half spark that I did not believe this player had going into this game. But down 13-7, Joe Flacco really just creates the kind of second half poise and composure that really I did not expect going into this game. The Patriots had them locked and loaded for the entire first half. It was 13-7. Then he comes out with 3 straight touchdowns. It was extremely impressive. He comes out with 3 touchdowns and an interception, nearly 400 yards through the air, and outlasted Tom Brady and played way better than that other quarterback in the biggest game for this team all season. This was an impressive performance by Joe Flacco. I give him the game ball for this week, and obviously he is on his way to the Super Bowl, his first time in his entire career. Got to give your hats off to Joe Flacco. Just an impressive performance, and it's Flacco versus Kaepernick in the Super Bowl. So that'll wrap it up here on the NFL Goal Line. We're running very quick here on this presentation. We'll be right back one Tuesday from tonight for the recaps and previews of the Super Bowl. We'll bring it all the way back next Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Any final thoughts, Phil, before we wrap up?
Hopefully we get a lot of research done. I'm actually talking a little bit more to Hank. I think he's going to join us on our Super Bowl show. That'd be good to get another voice and opinion. Other than that, I guess we'll just see you next Tuesday, guys.
Yeah, we promise we'll have a lot more preparation for next Tuesday's show. We're running a little short here, but we thank you guys for joining us. And for next week, if you want to contact us and get, obviously, your reactions throughout the week, we have a Facebook page. It's the NFL Goal Line with Nick and Phil. If I read it off here, it's www.facebook.com/groups/NFL Goal Line with Nick and Phil. No spaces there. And you'll be able to chime in and give your thoughts on the Super Bowl and anything around the National Football League. We'll try to get you guys going here for next weekend's show. And also, we're on Twitter as well, NFL Goal Line with Nick and Phil. Sorry for the background noise here. And any way you want to contact us, we're also on the air. My call-in number for next week will be 951-515-4552. Thank you guys for listening. Wrapping up here on NFL Goal Line, we leave you with one final NFL Goal Line theme as we try to get you guys going for Super Bowl 47. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next week.